In this episode of the Beamable Game Dev Podcast, I sit down with Beamable's CTO Ali El Rhermoul, and we discuss what's cool at Beamable. Let's get into the interview. Ali, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Very good to be here. I'm doing great. Yeah, it's nice and sunny here. No complaints.
Love it. So we're gonna jump right in. What's your first gaming experience?
Oh, that's a fun one. So it's hard to say really, since my first computer was actually set up for me by my uncle, and he had pre-installed all these kinds of games, and one of the earliest ones was of course Prince of Persia, which was ungodly difficult for me at the time, but really enjoyed it. And that was what I would say that was probably one of my first games. It was like a DOS, PC or very early Windows. You just like launch it from command prompt. I remember typing in the command prompts to get to the game, and it was awesome. And then subsequently, I would say the first sort of I guess mature gaming experience, like a game that I really got into and was super deep in, and was really like the multiplayer community really sucked me in, was actually Vampire the Masquerade: The Redemption, which was by Activision and Nihilistic Software, released back in 1999, which was truly first true multiplayer RPG that I played, and really enjoyed that. And of course StarCraft. I would say those two were kind of at the same time for me. StarCraft, staying up late until 2 a.m. playing against people all around the world from my native Morocco, and of course Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, the whole RPG element, introduction to the world of darkness, which to this day is one of my favorite tabletop RPG universes.
I love it. It's cool to me that you mentioned your uncle setting up that computer and playing Prince of Persia. My uncle is who got me into gaming, and I remember in '89 when he got the Game Boy. They got two of them, and we were linking them up. But Prince of Persia was one of the games, and I just remember continually jumping and dying, jumping.
Totally.
And
dying. Exactly. Today, it kind of feels to me whenever I see one of those machine learning algorithms learning to play, kind of reminds me of me playing Prince of Persia.
I love it. So looking back through the years, what would you say are three of your favorite games?
Oh, that's a really hard one. So I'm a huge RPG fan. I'm a huge real-time strategy games fan, and I would say a really big grand strategy as well. Big fan of grand strategy, and so I would say that best RPG, I would say Neverwinter Nights, but purely because the modability. I got into games because I started modding first. In fact, I started modding in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption, which is probably why I loved it so much. Extremely moddable game. And so I would say Neverwinter Nights was the best moddable multiplayer RPG I've played, just because I was running in my own server with some friends, and we scripted the hell out of this server. Crafting systems, you name it, whatever you can name. We made hunger systems, all kinds of really amazing. It had an incredibly vibrant modding community, one of the best I've seen yet. So great introduction to game development. So I would say that's got to be up there as one of the best, most influential in my life RPGs, multiplayer RPGs. Then I would say I can't omit StarCraft. StarCraft was truly, again, loved it a lot because I definitely modded it as well. I created the various custom maps, and it's incredible to see the influence that the map editors in StarCraft and Warcraft 3, that they had on the game industry. I mean, Dota was the result of a Warcraft 3 map, which the map editor for Warcraft 3 was actually, a successor to the StarCraft 1 map editor, which was absolutely incredible. The sheer amount of gameplay ideas that were tried out were unbelievable. Some of the most fun I've had with friends, in LAN parties, as well as online remotely. So StarCraft definitely merits a place on that. And then I would say, I'll say this: StarCraft is probably a tie for me with StarCraft for the real-time strategy genre. StarCraft and Dawn of War, Warhammer 40K. The first one was an incredible blend of RPG and strategy. So I know I'm breaking the rules a little bit, but I would say StarCraft and Dawn of War are tied. And then I would say last, but not least, certainly, I've logged a lot of hours. This is just purely by the number of hours and the incredibly steep learning curve. Crusader Kings 2, but also 3. I would say the number 3 is really just they did it right. They took Paradox did it right. They basically took number 2, they modernized it, added better graphics, but at the heart of it was really this incredible narrative engine that could procedurally generate, well, some combination of designer content and procedurally generate stories for your characters in this grand strategy context, right? So like capturing castles, conquering territories, but also, hey, you've just had a son, and by the way, like your son has these traits, and that algorithm must be incredible. I've tried as side projects, just kind of reproducing that algorithm, trying to create it. I plan to publish that on GitHub at some point, just so people can take a look. But it's one of the most incredible bifurcations of RPG and strategy that I've seen. So definitely merits a place. I would say in sheer number of hours and learning curve, and sort of just how deeply you can go, I would say Crusader Kings 2 and 3 really deserve a spot on there.
I love it. Next, we want to know, what games are you currently playing?
Well, I've got to say, I recently reinstalled Dawn of War 1. I'm actually listening to some audiobooks, Caiaphas Cain series, which is a Warhammer 40K novel following a commissar, and it's a really fun action adventure kind of novel series, and it got me really nostalgic for Dawn of War Warhammer 40K. So I reinstalled that. I also played a lot of, I've got to say, again, a little bit dated at this point, but Witcher 3, definitely one of my favorite all-time RPGs. Spent a lot of time on that. And then recently Cyberpunk as well, of course. I can't not have played that. So I would say those are the most recent ones that I played, deep immersive RPGs. And of course, I always, maybe a couple times a year, I'll pick up again and ring up some childhood friends of mine. Heroes of Might and Magic 3, one of my all-time favorite games. There's a really nice modding community there too, which has kept the game alive and introduced modern multiplayer. Even though it's a turn-based game, you can kind of play in parallel with each other. And then once you actually meet each other, then the game kind of says, okay, well, now we switch to actual turn-based multiplayer where you have to wait your turn, which makes it a lot of fun. So I would say Heroes 3, definitely on the regular, one of the regular rotations. Counter-Strike, of course, play it with the team. You know this, Josh. Yeah. And of course, Among Us as well are some of the games that I've been playing lately.
That's great. That's great. Let's transition a little bit and talk about Beamable, right? And what are some of the things that you find are just cool about Beamable and what it offers?
Yeah, so I feel like honestly, in like my life as a gamer, I feel like Beamable is a natural transition to like started off modding, shipped games, very large licensed IP games, and Beamable is kind of the next natural step, which is kind of goes back to the world of, in some ways, I really enjoyed playing games. I enjoyed making games more, and to an extent, I would say I also enjoy. To a large extent, to a parallel extent, I also enjoy facilitating other people making games. So one of the things that's really cool about Beamable is we take a really different approach to game development. Having made games, I know that you can't really reinvent the wheel. You can't reinvent the wheel everywhere. Sometimes you do want to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you do want to innovate and break the mold and try something new and really sort of bring something fresh to the industry. But other times you just need some feature, whether it's chat or multiplayer or whatever. And I can tell you in my modding days, I relied heavily on the mods of others to complement the servers that I ran and stuff like that, right? So for me, Beamable is really about providing an opinionated approach to these kinds of tools and provide you some features that you can really are optimized less for sort of infinite flexibility and SDK kind of approach, and more from the perspective of you just want chat, or you just want guilds, or you just want an inventory, and you don't want to spend any time on that. Drag and drop this prefab into your game and accelerate your time to market. My experience in both game development and in modding and in life in general, I find that there's a lot of magic that happens in small teams that is much less likely to occur in larger teams, just because there's a lot of consensus that needs to be formed and a lot of a lot of communication that needs to be had in order to achieve that sort of common vision. Whereas in small teams, you can often get a handful of people who really believe in what they're doing and who really have these fresh ideas and can do them unencumbered without having to sort of circle it around the table. They can just do it and make something really cool. So with Beamable, that's what we want to enable. We want to enable these really potent small teams who have a vision, who are really excited to build awesome big games without having to reinvent every single little component, right? And very much understanding that something that they drag and drop today from Beamable, like let's say an account login flow or a chat or whatever, they might want in the fullness of time to replace it with their own special sauce for that particular service, right? But ultimately getting to that point, games have shifted from being sort of, this sort of large, intense development process, and then you launch the game until you're done, and then you're done, to being this sort of large, intensive process, and then you launch the game, and then another large, intensive process to sort of live operate the game and fix all the bugs and do all of that stuff. So we want to shorten that first development process. We want to get you to launch as quickly as possible. That's really the goal. Get to launch as quickly as possible with sort of features that are sort of combine sort of the innovation that you're bringing, the special sauce that you're bringing, and then a bunch of the table stakes features that we provide out of the box, sort of in best practices for the industry, stuff that you've seen in other games and been like, I want that, right? I want that chat system. And bring that and just grab that from Beamable and integrate it. So that's what I think is a little bit different from the sort of, here's a bunch of low-level stuff, cobble it together yourself, and inevitably in attempting to do that, you realize that you could have built it yourself in the same amount of time. So that integration hell is what we want to avoid. We want to have sort of fully actualized features ready to go that get you to live as quickly as possible.
Let's talk about some of those features. Like you mentioned chat and leaderboards. What are some of the things that are basically drag and drop when you install Beamable?
It's a good question. So I would say we've got tournaments prefab. We've got we've got leaderboards. We've got account management. Nobody gets into the games industry to implement, sign in with Apple or sign in with Google or whatever, right? These are necessary parts. And today, if you have login with Facebook, you need login with Apple. So like there's these multiplier effects that make it really painful to do even the most simple things and to get your game live. So we want to take that pain away. We want to own that pain, right? And so the account management flow is one of the more painful things to get right. We have a lot of others that we're in the process of building. There's a few others I didn't mention, but there are a lot of others we're building. And we've actually taken this approach of, initially we were thinking, okay, well, one prefab per feature, but now we've shifted our thinking to more of there can be infinite variations of any given feature. So you can have one type of chat, landscape chat, portrait chat, they have different requirements. So we're also leaning a lot more into this variance-based approach with the intention on in the future to also open that up to the community, right? To let other people, create these fully actualized prefabs that are built on Beamable and can share them within their own company, within their own games, across games, or also share them to the broader community.
I love it. And we're talking things like multiplayer, which I mean.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Matchmaking. It's like there's a whole lot of things that, when I say matchmaking, most developers will have something very specific in mind. And it'll be maybe one of 3 or 4 flavors that by and large, like everybody does the same thing. And chat is very similar, right? And chat is actually one such example where doing something different can actually be a detriment, because ultimately you want players to have a familiar enough experience, right? Like you don't want people have to learn all over again what channels are, in the context of your game, or how do they meet, how private messages work, right? Like everybody's used to Discord and Slack and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger and all of these messages, and they have more in common than they are different, right? And so maintaining that sort of familiarity is actually important, for the player experience. And so that's what we want to sort of have, in the future, we want to have all of these different flavors available out of the box, such that, and already integrated with the Beamable backend, and already integrated with analytics, and already integrated with the user identity, right? You don't have to sort of cobble all these things together. You basically just pull it into your game and you get all of those things. And then if you did want to sort of, like, we gather analytics on your behalf, it's your data, you own it. But if you did want to say, for example, you say, oh, we already have our own BI pipeline, business intelligence pipeline, we want to forward all of the data to, Amazon S3 or Mixpanel or Amplitude, we actually have functionality that allows us to forward these events, right? So the whole idea is that we provide you with stuff that is already instrumented out of the box so that you can focus on your special sauce, the thing that makes your game special.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I love getting to learn about this stuff as I'm brand new to the company and hearing from you guys. So thank you so much for taking the time this morning to chat, and I hope you have a fantastic day.
Likewise, Josh, my pleasure. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm Ali. I'm the CTO at Beamable. I'm on LinkedIn. Always happy to hear all of your fantastic stories. We're learning from you. We do not have a monopoly on innovation. We think that really the innovation comes from the market, from you guys building really cool games. So, don't hesitate to reach out, say hi, and happy to explore how we can work together.
All right, we'll talk very soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Beamable Game Dev Podcast. To learn more about Beamable, head on over to beamable.com.